All right, I think we can get started. Thanks everybody for filling out the poll. Looks like a pretty wide range of responses there. Uh, Thank you everybody for taking the time to join us today. My name is Tanner Watt. I'm a municipal program specialist with local authority services in Ontario. We're going to be hearing today from Alicia McLean, National Sales Director, and Andrew Chow, Practice Leader for Accessibility. They're both with Roth IAMS, which is one of the approved suppliers through the Canoe Procurement Group. Canoe is a nonprofit organization made up of LAS and our sister organizations across Canada to help lower costs and simplify procurement for municipalities. Couple quick housekeeping notes before we get going. We are recording this webinar. We'll send out a link to all of the registrants afterwards. Once the presentation is over, we're going to open things up for Q&A. Put Alicia and Andrew on the hotspot. If you do have any questions at any time, just click on the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and type in your question. Once we get to the end, we'll start reading them out. We are going to be sending out a survey as well to get some feedback on the webinar. So with that follow-up email, if you can take the time to fill that out, that helps us make sure that these webinars are meeting your needs. So with that, I will hand it off to Alicia and Andrew.
Thanks, Tanner. So I'm Alicia McLean. I'm our National Sales Director at RothIAMS. So if you have any questions about Roth as an organization or any of our services, I believe Tanner is sending out some our contact information in the follow-up email. So you can always reach us that way, or you can pop questions into the chat as well if you need it. Andrew, would you mind just popping over to the next slide? So, just to give you a little bit of background on Roth and sort of who we are and what we do in the public sector, you have everyone sort of dealing with the same issue of they're trying to figure out how to deal with their aging infrastructure. So, everyone has this massive deferred capital renewal maintenance backlog. And they've got limited capital dollars that they're trying to figure out how to be as impactful with those capital dollars as possible. Roth's was really born out of that need. And all of our services sort of tie back to helping organizations deal with that backlog. Um, our corporate mission is to solve the world's deferred capital renewal and maintenance backlog crisis. And some of you might be wondering what we mean by deferred capital renewal and maintenance, which really spearheaded our marketing campaign that some of you may have seen if you follow us on LinkedIn or our webinars or have seen us at some of the trade shows. The Keep Calm and Don't Say DM. And that really is because deferred maintenance has become the industry standard term that everyone uses to reference this backlog, when really it doesn't encompass maintenance at all. It's really capital renewal dollars that they're talking about. And we think that using the term deferred maintenance really undermines the work that the facility managers are doing. So we're encouraging people to move away from the term deferred maintenance and find something that encompasses what these facility managers are trying to do a little bit better. And Andrew, can you pop forward to the next slide there? Wonderful. So some of you might wonder what the IAMS stands for in Roth. It is Integrated Asset Management Strategies. And what we really mean by that is we're trying to help organizations to meet that sweet spot of capital planning excellence, operational excellence, and performance excellence. So today we're talking about accessibility, which really falls under that capital planning excellence piece of it. We're one of the largest firms in North America. We're Canada-wide, we're US-wide as well. We have a ton of experience in the public sector with the municipalities. Specifically, we've helped over 59 municipalities with these integrated asset management strategies. Andrew, just one more click there. So,
Oh,
so
go ahead.
today, today's main presenter is going to be Andrew Chow. He is our accessibility practice leader. He's got 10 years of accessibility audit experience. He's also the one who's responsible for creating the accessibility methodology within RothIAMS. He is also Rick Hansen Foundation certified, if that is an accreditation that your organization is working towards. And with that, I will hand it off to Andrew to take over and walk us through some of the accessibility assessments.
Thanks a lot, Alicia, and glad to see you all today. So just to also let you know, there's also do have a team of Rick Hansen Foundation certified professionals as well. So it's not just me here. So we're happy to help you to audit your building according to your needs. And I'll just go through the things that we do. And before we even start there, we should discuss why we need to do the accessibility audits. Why is accessibility so important? And so I'll start off with the accessibility needs in society in general. The next thing we'll have to look at is what are the barriers at our facilities, at our assets? How do we go about identifying them? And then once we identify them, and we come up with some solutions to address those barriers, so what do we do with those recommendations? So this is the gist of the presentation for today. So accessibility needs. Before I started in this industry, if you talked to me about accessibility, the first thing that'll come to mind is wheelchair access. And it's not surprising because we use the wheelchair symbol as the symbol for accessibility. And of course, it's still a very integral part of accessibility, but there are other accessibility needs out there as well. So, other than creating spaces for just wheelchair access, we also have to keep in mind some other things, some other disabilities that we need to look into. And just to show you some statistics from Statistics Canada, they have evaluated that approximately 27% of Canadians have some sort of disability, and whether it is mobility or other types of disability, there's about 27% of Canadians that are struggling with it. And it's not just for a certain age group, it's actually affecting quite a lot of different people from different age groups. So accessibility is actually very important thing that we need to address in our built environment. So just some of the disabilities that a person may face. So back to mobility, wheelchair access. So do we have enough turning space in, let's say, the washrooms, the entrances? Can people in a wheelchair freely mobilize throughout the building or to the building? And other than mobilizing, you have to think about flexibility, dexterity. These are important when you need to use certain things, opening a door or using a control, things like that. So those are need to be considered as well. And other than those disabilities, we also have to consider vision, hearing as well, and neurological. And these things can also be improved by improving our built environment. Well, so now that we know that there is an accessibility need in society and we need to address that, how do we go about identifying those barriers? Because if you just go through a building, you might not notice that there are actually barriers out there. So what do we need to do? Well, so first, we have to know what is required. And in Ontario, there are legislated requirements that we have to meet. And that is governed by the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, or AODA, as you might have heard. And we have to understand when do we need to make these improvements, what kind of improvements we need to make, and how should the improvements be made. And under the AODA, they have provided us barrier-free design guidelines through the Ontario Building Code and through another regulation, which is called the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation. And there are the different pillars under that regulation, and one of the pillars is concerning the built environment. And in general, the regulation, the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation, will address the outside items like your parking lot or exterior walkways, and then service counters. And then the Ontario Building Code will deal with the building itself and also any exterior stairs and ramps that are connected to the entrances. So in Canada, in addition to the building code, there are other standards out there. Different organizations that create their own standards. You might have CSA create their standard, and actually a lot of municipalities have created their own. And the most well-known one would be the City of London. They had created their own in 2006, and I believe they recently updated theirs. And I've seen a lot of these facility accessibility design guidelines, or FADS. They have drawn from the City of London FADS. And the FADS just is another set of standards that will guide on how to design your space. And the FADS will typically include things that aren't covered under the AODA. It won't be covered under the Ontario Building Code, just like the bookshelves here. Or there are some specific categories that are not kind of covered under building code. So you see on the image in the right, in their index, they have specific design guidelines for fire stations, police stations. So if you have specific needs in your community, and if you want to use the FADS, that is something to be considered. Now going back to the Ontario Building Code, so technically, you don't have to improve your building because in the Ontario Building Code, there's a grandfather clause. So buildings were designed and built in accordance to their latest building code at the time. So if you have a building in let's say, the 1970s, it won't be up to current code because that code is much older. And you won't have to do anything to your building unless you met some criteria. And that's usually when you do some major renovations. And the Ontario Building Code provides a definition in Part 11, defining what a major renovation is. And if your project meets that criteria, then you'll have to consider putting the accessibility design, because you'll have to bring that part of the building to the current code. So that's we'll have to keep in mind when to make these accessibility improvements. Now, having said that, you don't have to improve your existing buildings. There is also the issue about human rights. So if there is a specific need for your building occupants and they make human rights requests, you might have to make some accommodations and improve your built environment. So although there is a grandfather clause, you might still have to improve your building. But in general, it's not that you have to improve your building right now today, because it's all based on if you make a major renovation or not. So understanding that you do have some legislative requirements, so how do we identify whether we are meeting those requirements or not? So in that case, we're going to have to assess the building in accordance to the guidelines that we have chosen. So there are a couple of ways to assess your building. So we can do a baseline screening accessibility checklist. So for that, we just have a set of, let's say, 10 to 20 questions in general, asking about how accessible the entrance is or the built environment is. For example, is the building entrance accessible? Are there door controls? Are the ramps too steep? That sort of thing. And then the comprehensive accessibility audit, which is more detailed. And then, as we mentioned earlier, we can also do a Rick Hansen survey. So before you choose those different types of assessments, consider what you need. Do you need a high-level analysis or in-depth analysis? How many assets do you need to assess? Do you have 100, or is it just 5? And also there might be timelines that you have to meet. So do you have to improve your building in the next year, or is it just you want to understand how accessible your building is and you want to make a plan for it? So consider those things before you choose that type of assessment. And so I'll go through each type of assessment. So the baseline screening checklist is a high-level checklist. And and on the right have an example which is derived from the ASTM standard for building condition assessments. And we can create a checklist that is based on that ASTM standard. So what is good about this type of checklist is that we can do a quick evaluation of the site just to get a quick understanding on how accessible that asset is. And if you have a large portfolio of assets, if you have 100, 200 buildings, and you want to just get a quick understanding, then this would be the way to go. You can see quickly at a glance how accessible your portfolio is. Now, the drawbacks, of course, is this checklist is not definitive or conclusive. Usually, we're going to just base it on visual observation. And we can't measure everything just to see if it meets the guidelines or not. This is the objective of this assessment is just to be to get a high level understanding. Now, of course, you're not stuck with this type of checklist. We can work together and see what your community needs, and we can adjust this high-level checklist. Now to the comprehensive accessibility audit, which is the more detailed audit, and we will create another checklist that will look at the code line by line, just to make sure that the barriers that we're looking at is meeting the code or not. And you can choose to incorporate the FADS. So let's say you want to use your own municipality's FADS as a guideline as well. We can incorporate that into the checklist. And this type of assessment is ideal if you want to confirm that your barriers or the built environment is conforming to the code. And we can also identify specific areas for improvement. The previous checklist is more high level. We're just talking about generalities. But here we're going to go to each location and get an understanding of whether it's conforming to the code or not. And then there's the Rick Hansen survey, which is gaining popularity across the country. And this one, it's going to be based on their scoring system and on their own guidelines, which is based on CSA standards. So this is good if you want to promote a certain asset. So if you want to advertise that your particular building, let's say your town hall, is accessible, and you want to show that there's some certification, then this is a good way to do that. And but just to note that this survey doesn't specifically address the guidelines based on code because their survey is based on CSA standards. So you just have to keep in mind that you have to follow the legislative standards. So just the Rick Hansen survey again, they developed their survey based on the CSA standards. And after you've done your survey, you can put it on their registry, and then people can look up that building and see whether it is certified. And again, it is used to market your building. And so having said all that, one thing I do want to emphasize again, that you do have to follow the legislation, which is the AODA. So whatever FADS you choose or a Rick Hansen survey, at the end of the day, you have to make sure that those barriers meet the Ontario Building Code and the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation. So now that you've done the survey, you've done the audits, you've identified the locations that need improvements, and you have a list of recommendations to improve those building elements. What are we going to do with them? Usually what happens is you're going to get a separate accessibility audit report, and then all the recommendations are in that report, but if you don't extract that data out or you don't look at it ever again, then you won't be able to improve your asset efficiently. So we've come up with a way that we can help you to implement the recommendations that are in the accessibility audits. And then we understand that there are limitations too when you want to implement those recommendations. And the first thing is going to be budget. Unfortunately, we don't have an infinite amount of resources to improve our building. And a lot of the recommendations may be resource intensive. So the budget is going to be an issue. And you may have other capital renewal priorities at the same time. For example, if you have money only either to fix the roof or to build a new washroom, you might have to address the roof because that's more of a concern. So there are definitely things to consider when you have those set of recommendations. So before you even prioritize those different recommendations, or for example, do I fix the roof first, or do I improve accessibility? Before developing a system to determine that, we should also talk about how you want to prioritize the accessibility improvements themselves. So I always think that if you have a very nice washroom in a building, you've built it up to code, you built a universal washroom, it has all the accessories that a person would need, but yet you cannot get to the building because the main entrance is too narrow, or there's no accessible parking, or there's no path to the building, or there's no accessible path to the washroom, then it diminishes the impact of that universal washroom. So it's very important to consider your path of travel before you make those implementations of your recommendation. So I always think of how does that person get to the building first? So how does the person park there? Or how does the person get from the street to the building? How does the person get into the building? How does the person get through the main entrance? How does the person get through the corridors? And then how do I improve those different building elements? So before you implement any improvements, just remember to consider your path of travel. So these are some of the examples I had. So there are some sites that I've seen. So for example, the picture on the left, it has a sign that's saying it's an accessible washroom, but the only way to get there was through a set of stairs. So it kind of diminishes the impact of that universal washroom. So if a person can't get there, they can't get access. They can't use it. Oh, so I guess it's time for a poll question.
Tanner, if you can just cue the second poll for us, thank you.
Mhm. I'll just give a couple of seconds for you to just fill that in, and then I'll continue on.
Tanner, we can't see the responses on our side, so you let us know when enough time has passed for the poll.
All right. Still got a few people responding, I think. All right, I think we can close it there. So the results were whoever complains loudest gets their upgrade first was 13%. Who prioritized the busiest buildings was 26%. Upgrade during renovations was largest share at 35%. And still figuring it out is 26%.
Wonderful.
Well, thanks everyone for responding. And it's good that, yes, you should consider the accessibility improvements as you renovate your building. And hopefully, as we continue along, those who can't are still trying to figure it out, hopefully this approach will help you decide. Here we're going to describe the multivariable prioritization. And why this is important is that even let's say you only focus on the accessibility improvements, what do you do first? Do you put in the grab bars and the washroom, or do you reconstruct the entrance ramp, or do you rebuild the main entrance? What can you do first? And how do we decide the priority? So we've come up with some examples here to help you think about that. So in general, the multivariable prioritization is how this works is you determine the categories that are important to your organization. And then we put a weighting against all these categories. And based on where the building element is located or how important that building element is, you can determine a score, and that score will help you prioritize and implement the accessibility improvements in that order. So some things to consider in your prioritization. Here are a few things of building size or occupancy frequency. So I think it's more worthwhile if a lot of people are using that particular building. And so the one thing that you do there, it will have the most impact. It will impact more people. And you can maybe consider your facility type. Maybe you want to prioritize the recreational facilities, your arenas, your community centers over, let's say, a maintenance garage or administrative area. And also you may want to consider the timeline. So maybe you've identified a specific need at a particular building and you want to give more prioritization to that. So those are some things to consider. And here's an example that we developed for a housing corporation. So you'll see there are 4 categories at the top. There's the residence type, barrier, location, and the consequence of deferring that improvement, and then the design guideline improvement. And under each category, there are subcategories that will determine the score. And combining all these together, you'll come up with one score, and then you just rank those improvements based on that score. And of course, you're not limited to these categories. Again, it's based on what your community needs. So, but this, I think, is a good start if you're just trying to figure out in the beginning of what's important. And then I would just take it back to your committee or your stakeholders and see what's important. But we can develop any kind of scoring that will prioritize your recommendations. So after you prioritize your recommendations, you don't want to just leave it out there as a separate set of data. You do want to incorporate that into your capital plans. As we've mentioned, a lot of times we're doing the accessibility improvements when there's a renovation, so when there's a capital project involved. And a lot of times we're all of our data is segregated. So we have our improvements, a list of improvements from our BCAs for our building condition assessments. We have a separate audit for accessibility, and then we have other audits of other disciplines. So when things are segregated, it's kind of hard to keep track. So we also promote that we want to integrate our accessibility improvements with our capital plan. And we also have a software to do that. And this is our in-house software. It is called SLAM, and we can incorporate our BCA data and our accessibility improvement data or any other data if you have asset tagging or you have energy improvements to do as well. We can incorporate that, and having all that data together, we can do all sorts of analysis with it. And in this way, we can efficiently implement those improvements, and we can make a better judgment on what to do first. And so finally, once it's all said and done, what you want to do is think about what kind of design guideline you want to evaluate with your space. So if the baseline thing that we'll have to do is base the evaluation on Ontario Building Code. And then you can consider FADS if that's what your organization needs. And then you want to assess your existing facilities, of course, based on those guidelines. And after you assess those buildings, you're going to have a list of improvements. And in order to figure out what to do first, well, we recommend that you prioritize your recommendations based on the multivariable prioritization system. And then in this way, we can do this with much efficiency, and there's not really any second guessing. It's all systematically planned out. And then after that, you just implement your accessibility recommendations based on those guidelines. So when you come to do your improvements, you'll design it to the current code. And so that's basically what I have for today, and I'll open up the floor for questions.
Thanks, Andrew. So just while we're waiting for some of the questions to come in, if there's any, just a couple of notes. The QR code on the page here has a link to our thought leadership page. There's a lot of really valuable content in there for municipalities trying to manage their aging infrastructure. There's webinars, blog posts, all of it relating back to sort of helping people navigate that road. You can also follow us on LinkedIn if you want any to receive updates on upcoming webinars or other thought leadership content.
All right, and I think we have one more quick poll question to do while we give people some time to type in their questions. So we'll launch that one and give a minute or so to respond. In the meantime, if anybody does have any follow-up questions for Andrew or Alicia, please click on that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and type them in.
I did see, Andrew, there is a question here
Okay.
about which audit is best for an in-depth analysis.
So I would recommend the comprehensive audit, and here we're going to use the building code and the integrated accessibility standards regulation as our basis, and then this way we can compare that building element line by line and make sure that that it is compliant. And again, we can customize it in accordance to your needs. If you want to add a FADS in there, we can do that as well.
Wonderful. Somebody else asked about if we can share the slides afterwards, which we're happy to do. Tanner has a copy of the presentation and he can include it in the follow-up email that'll go out after our webinar is completed. And then we've got another question about what other type of webinars that we offer, which again, I would recommend. Our webinars are always posted to the website. So I would go in and check out the webinar link in there and take a look around. There's a variety of topics. Accessibility is just one of our service lines. We also do a lot of asset management, capital planning, building condition assessments, structural assessments, anything really to deal with that aging infrastructure. So take a poke around the website. I think you'll find a lot of content in there valuable.
Yeah, we also host additional webinars either from LAS or AMO, and the details on that can be found on either one of those websites.
And I just wanted to add again, I think the multi-variable prioritization will indeed help a lot. I've only been able to do it at a surface level here. So I hope that the webinars on that will help you, because I think that's actually the most important part in all this. How do we end up implementing all those improvements? So
Yeah, that's
I highly
definitely
recommend it.
That's definitely the piece we see organizations struggling with the most. And we've really only touched on the methodology of the MVP in this session, just given time and sort of the amount of content we were covering. But if you do have an interest in learning more about that MVP, I'm more than happy to connect with you and give you some more information. But if you want to send an email to that accessibility@rothiams.com, we can definitely get you some additional materials to help.
All right, so we'll give it a couple more minutes to see if any other questions do come in. If anybody's planning to head out, thanks very much for taking the time to join us. As has been mentioned, I'll be sending out a follow-up email to everybody with contact information and a link to the video.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right, so I think seeing no further questions, we can wrap it up here. Thanks very much, Andrew and Alicia, for taking the time to join us, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you,
us.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Thank you. Have a good day.